Hi there. My name is Bryce Rankins, and you're listening to episode 16 of Sneaky Geek.
My name is Bryce Rankins, and I'm joined by my co-host Brian Romero.
Heyo.
And our special guest Dave Ziegler.
Howdy.
Dave Ziegler.
That was terrible. Fuck it.
Deal with it. And that is immediately we have our explicit rating. This is a very special Christmas episode because we are getting prepared for the Doctor Who Christmas special, which is coming up here in a couple of weeks. For us, back in the past, we're recording this in September.
It's very timey-wimey.
But this time, instead of
wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Instead of Dave being talking from the future, Dave is actually here with us in the present.
Yeah. Hello, present!
So, we need to talk about Doctor Who, but first, qualifications. When did you start watching Doctor Who, Dave?
I started watching Doctor Who seriously with the Whoboot and... Oh, that's terrible. I'm never saying that again.
Never say it.
When it came back in 2005 from its banishment by the BBC.
It's like 20-year hiatus. No, it wasn't even that long.
It was not,
2005.
89 is when it pretty much went off the air temporarily, with air quotes, which became a permanent hiatus shortly thereafter. It came back temporarily 99 with BBC Fox joint venture, which is kind of weird because Fox is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is British.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, so it goes on hiatus from 89 to about 99 when they do the movie with Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor. And as an aside, I love Paul McGann. I don't know.
Cool Doctor. Okay movie.
Well, it's funny. I was watching the movie with my buddy Rob 2 or 3 years ago, and he had already seen it. And he says, okay, you need to know. The cool stuff is from the BBC. The stupid stuff is from Fox. And I'm like...
Typical.
Yeah, okay. Americans coming in and fucking shit up. But actually, even though McGann got short shrift from like the video and TV stuff, Big Finish, the audio.
The audio drops.
Oh, God, those audios are amazing. They are pimp as fuck. But anyway, it comes back in 2005 with Russell T Davies. Mm-hmm. And that's when it... Well, the funny thing is we're used to getting it the same day now as England. Well, I mean the same calendar day, whatever. Right. But initially, we didn't get that first season until 6 months after it had aired in England. Like by the time we get it, it had already been announced. Not only had it been announced that Eccleston was already leaving, Tennant was coming in. Yeah. Fun fact, I'm going to have a lot of fun facts.
Hell yeah.
Tennant was who they originally wanted, but he was unavailable because he was making a Harry Potter movie.
Barty Crouch Jr.
That's right.
Bingo.
Which is so funny because Barty Crouch Jr.'s part in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is
teeny weeny.
So
teeny weeny.
He comes in at the very... I don't even think you see him at the the cup, do you? Initially at the Quidditch World Cup?
No.
We get him in the trial scene.
Oh, there's some flashbacks.
We get him at the trial in the flashback with the pensive. But then we get him at the end. And that's pretty much it. And I remember thinking on one of the times when ABC was running the Harry Potter weekends, I thought...
When they press the Harry Potter button and don't worry about work for a week.
Right. Pretty much, yeah. And I remember thinking, for this, they couldn't cast Tennant as 9, but I loved Eccleston too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it seems a lot smaller on the ABC one because they run the movie at 1.3 speeds.
Wait, what?
It's true. No, random aside, ABC Family, now Freeform, when they play movies, and many other stations do this when they're playing like reruns of Seinfeld and things like that, they play them at a slightly faster speed so that they can have more. They can get through the movie faster and still have as many commercials. Yeah.
I did not know
So
that.
Harry Potter, if
Yeah,
you watch a
that's right.
side by side of what happens in Harry Potter, it may not be 1.3 speeds, but if you watch Harry Potter side by side with the DVD and the other, like the movie is not as fast as it is on television.
Interesting.
Wow, I had no
There's
idea.
plenty of these comparisons
I
for
thought I watched
Seinfeld and Friends.
Cable TV anymore? A whole lot? But okay.
Yeah, a lot of shows will do reruns to move the movie along faster and to move TV shows along faster. Friends happens on Friends for syndicated Friends episodes, Seinfeld episodes, and absolutely for Harry Potter.
Because I know they cut things out of stuff. Like
Right.
with the Doctor Who episodes, like the Christmas specials, you know, they're originally, you know, they air in like an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 5 minutes. And they'll cut those down. They'll cut things out of them to fit them into the
get the-
normal hour running period. Hell, even for like with the 11th Hour, Matt Smith's first episode, they cut stuff out because that originally ran like an hour 5. You know, and the bit, like when Amelia gives him the apple with the smiley face, you know, and he puts it in his pocket. Later, when he takes it out to show the now grown Amy, look, see, I'm the same dude.
Yeah.
You know, they cut that gets cut out of most, and along with
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and
I guess I watched
when
the
We don't watch
version.
DVR.
yeah,
we watch
when he's doing the bit about, oh, I'm hungry, I need food, and he goes through the sequence of all
all that stuff
that it's a great sequence, and it frequently gets trimmed to get inside that normal broadcast hour.
How that's crazy.
Because
that's
my favorite bit in that sequence is when she's making him the bread and butter, and he flings the plate out, get out, never come back.
Yeah.
You know, so
it's crazy.
Anyways, yeah.
Okay, so that's your introduction to Doctor.
yes, yes.
It's gonna be one of those, and that's totally fine. So you started with Eccleston's Run, then?
Yes.
Did you start on Eccleston's Run on television,
As opposed to what?
as opposed to streaming it elsewhere? Or
Oh no, on TV. I mean, I knew that it was coming, and I had been interested. Like I had seen a couple of the Tom Baker episodes when I was a kid. My dad would watch it on occasion, but our public television station didn't have regular
Showing episodes.
If they had a regular showing of it, I
didn't know about
I wasn't aware of it. I'd stumble across it, and I was intrigued. You know, and then I find out, 25 years later that one of my friends in high school was super into it. I'm like, Sally, why are you doing me dirty like this? How come you didn't tell any of us about this?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I had seen one or two episodes as a kid and was intrigued. And then but I kind of filed that under like the same kind of thing as like the Tomorrow People.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
No.
It's another British show. And this was my introduction to British science fiction. It was teenagers, like the next step in human evolution. And, very similar to like X-Men in the sense
it
that
sounds very Power Ranger X-Men-y.
very, very similar to X-Men in that as adolescents, if you have the power, that's when it starts to exhibit itself.
Yeah.
But they've all got the same basic power set: telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, blah blah blah. They've got a fancy futuristic computer headquarters, blah blah. So I kind of filed Doctor Who in that sort of.
We should talk about
style.
this in just a bit too. Okay, so you start in with Eccleston's Run, and you're watching it as live as you can as
as it was airing on Sci-Fi.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow.
Sci-fi.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Well, there was no BBC America.
Brian, when did you start watching Doctor Who?
So here's the thing. When Dr. Foo.
Foo.
Jesus. Yes.
Dr. Foo Fighters.
When Dave Grohl first got on to Doctor Who, right? We'll put this in another episode.
Doctor Who.
So when Doctor Who first came out, my best friend Tate was super into it, and he kept trying to get me into it. And
Shout out to Tate.
Shout out
We
to
know
Tate.
you're listening.
Yes.
Hi, Tate.
What's up, Tate? Anyway, so not only him, but there's a lot of other people that I knew, super into it, and they were just like, you have to watch this. You have to watch this right now. You should watch all the episodes. And
Tate can be super intense, so I can just imagine him staring into you.
he does.
As he
He's been
tells
my
you
best
this.
friend for years, so he knows how to, it's like, whoa. Mm-hmm. So that kind of pushed me away, which kind of brings us around to our usual little gatekeepers kind of thing. He didn't mean to be it. He was he wanted me to
He was very earnest.
He was very earnest about it. And he knew that I would like it because, again, he's been my best friend for years. So
Right.
he knows the stuff that I like.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
I'll get back to you on that.
I'm going to get back to you on that. I'm going to come back. So a couple years later.
But like many things that Tate recommends, it turns out being exactly what you should be watching.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, totally. Like, yeah. So a couple years later, it's Matt Smith's run. And then I got a couple other people like, oh yeah, like, have you been watching Doctor Who lately? I'm like, no. It's like, oh, you should get into that. And like, they leave it at that. I'm like, maybe I should. And so at this point, Tate was still just like, hey, have you watched it lately? And I'm like, no. And again, like, oh, maybe I should. So I was homesick one day and was looking on the cables, like free. It was just before DVR,
the on-demand,
but the on-demand stuff. Mm-hmm. And so there was a few episodes that were on, and the first episode I ever watched was the one with what's his name? Craig.
James Corden.
James Corden.
Corden.
The tenant? No.
Yeah, The Lodger.
The Lodger. The first episode I ever watched was The Lodger,
which is hilarious.
Holy balls! Wait a minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I had no idea you came to it so late. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. So I watched The Lodger, and I was like, oh, this is really good. The next episode,
Vincent and the Doctor.
Vincent and the Doctor.
Oh, God.
So I went from hilarious, awesome, like, buddy dynamics, and I'm sitting there like, this is really good. Is this
okay? So did you cry all the tears or just most of them?
Most of the tears, because I'm still just like, what is going on right now? Like, because those two episodes are the best written.
Our stories are so similar.
Oh,
from that era, and I'm watching Vincent and the Doctor, and I'm just like, this is really cool. This is getting intense. Oh, what's going on? Oh, okay. I know what happens with Vincent Van Gogh, but how are they going to tie this? Okay, all right. And then, like, it gets to towards the end of the episode, I'm like, okay, that was a crazy cool monster. Okay, all right. Where's this going to go now? Okay, all right. And then they bring it back to the future with Bill Nighy, and I'm like, oh, God. Okay.
Oh, and when he takes him to show that people do love his work.
Yeah, he's like, hey, what do you think of Vincent Van Gogh? And then he's like, well then, and he lays his heart out. It's like, oh God. And that was
even still.
Those were my first two episodes.
I've seen Vincent and the Doctor a dozen times. I cry all the fucking tears every goddamn time. Every time it's goddamn it Doctor Who.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, Shaba, how did you get into Doctor Who?
My story for Doctor Who is extremely similar to Brian's. As Dave knows, I was really into BBC America when BBC America became a thing. Because I had I wouldn't say weird, but I had a very intense love for British comedy.
Let me tell you how intense his love for British comedy was.
Yeah.
So you know that Shaba was in my forensics class, speech and debate. This kid, I've never heard of this show before he shows up. I've never seen it. I've never seen an episode. Father Ted was like, he's trying to do a humorous interp from a Father Ted episode, and I have no idea what the fuck he's doing here. And I like Benny Hill, you know, and I'm not a big fan of Monty Python.
Which I did 2 Monty Python pieces during my tenure as a forensic student.
And yet I can't figure out what the fuck this kid's doing. I can't figure out if it's me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just not getting it.
Right.
Or if he's cut it so badly
that it's just not
making any fucking sense.
Yeah. Both are also possible.
Yes, both things can be true.
I took home trophies with that piece.
I know. I don't get it, but
yeah.
So I had this love of BBC comedy and British sitcoms, etc., because the BBC channel had come out. I now had a way to watch Monty Python beyond just the Holy Grail. I could watch the Monty Python TV show.
That's a terrible movie.
It is a terrible movie. I love it to death. It is nowhere near as good as their TV show.
Maybe you have to be stoned. Maybe you have to be stoned to watch it. I watched it in college. I was straight sober.
Yeah. Same.
I fucking couldn't understand why. I mean, and all my friends were raving about it.
I was the same way. There's definitely funny parts, but like I just didn't get it.
I was like, I don't fucking get it. What's so great about this fucking
I love
movie?
Holy Grail because Holy Grail is like a Boy Scouts camp sketch that has gone off the rails.
It's got to be way off the fucking rails for a 2-hour movie.
And that's the core of like my comedy writing comes from Monty Python. The dryness, the silliness, absurdist humor is huge right now. I'm more of an absurdist humor. I was really into British humor, and as a result, I was on BBC. I was watching BBC fairly often.
So you'd see the commercials.
So I'd see commercials for it. My brother was watching a lot of classic Doctor Who.
Which brother?
My older brother Barrett was watching a lot of...
I had Barrett in class.
Wow.
So I was really into British comedy.
You know, you've started out like this every single time we keep going off.
I know, I'm trying to...
So I've been really into British comedy.
So I was watching BBC all the time because of Monty Python and Father Ted and various other British sitcoms. And there were commercials for Doctor Who coming on, and classic Doctor Who, particularly Tom Baker's run, was on all the time. Mm-hmm. And Barrett loved it because it was like a callback to original Star Trek, and my family is very into Star Trek. And two, the cheap like quality of the costuming and things like that is pretty hilarious. You know, and sometimes the show was kind of ridiculous. So Barrett would watch it, but you know, there comes a point when you're watching it and you stop laughing at the graphics because you realize, oh crap, I've been sucked into a really good story. Much like the original Star Trek, where you're like, oh my gosh, this costume's terrible. Oh crap, I felt something, you know? So Barrett was really into that, but beyond that, I didn't really have any overwhelming desire to go watch it. I did not have really any introduction to British sci-fi. And then I met Doctor Who fans, and they drove me up the wall. And the thing was, it wasn't just they're too enthusiastic. It was a combination of the people who were too enthusiastic to the point where it was like their life. And it was like, can we not talk about Doctor Who right now? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And then I had a particular guy in an improv class who would not stop suggesting the TARDIS as a location and who would always speak with a terrible British accent. And I was like, I can't do this. And then, you know, there was the fact that like they were trying to recapture something that had already gone on. And I was like, let's talk about what's new and exciting right now. I wasn't necessarily into the idea of a revamping of that. And then there were those who were like screaming at each other over which Doctor's better, whether classic Doctors were better and all this.
11.
We kind of touched upon this in our
10.
first episode.
Yeah. So all of this gatekeeping, whatever happened from all sides of it. It's whenever I talk about gatekeeping, it is the quintessential example.
That's your go-to example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Whovians are either really enthusiastic or they have really strong opinions. Well, although that's way more prevalent, like the Star Wars fandom. But those two things kept me from watching the show.
Okay,
and
I can see that. Yeah.
It was my super senior year at
Cal State, I was going to say.
At Cal State. And this kid in my improv class drove me up the wall, and I was like, I'm not watching it. I don't care. I don't want to watch it because I don't want to be associated with that guy.
Tell me his name was Frank.
It wasn't.
No, just tell me it was.
No, his name was Frank.
Oh, fuck Frank.
It's actually Benjamin, and he always pronounced it Benjamin every time he introduced himself. Benjamin was just a classic example of what you shouldn't be in college.
Like a fake Thurston Howell III accent. And we just lost the entire under 25 demo.
Anyway.
And welcome back.
So, long story short, I'm sitting in my new place in North Hollywood, and I've just moved in. I don't want to make waves with my roommates, and my roommates are like, hey, we're going to watch some Doctor Who. You watch Doctor Who? And I'm like, I've never really sat down to watch it before. And they're like, oh, I guess we're starting Doctor Who over. And I'm like, well, we don't have to do. And they're like, no, come here. And so they sit me down and they watch with me the first episode of Chris Eccleston's run.
Rose,
yes.
Rose is the title of the episode, yes.
First episode of Chris Eccleston's run starts. I watch it. I'm like, this is pretty good. Mm-hmm. I'd watched a lot of Stargate and Stargate Atlantis, so I was okay with the weird, shitty graphics for the trash can swallowing Mickey, and it was good. I was like, yeah, I think I could watch a couple more of these. And then the next several episodes I watched were when I came in late the next night, and they were finishing Tennant's run. So I watched Tennant's last 4 episodes.
Oh God!
So I went from this is kind of crazy and silly to crazy heartbreak. I started with The Waters of Mars, and I watched.
You didn't get to his core awesome episodes, and then you went straight to
yeah, I didn't even see how Rose ended. I was just like, well, I guess there's this. I mean, I think Martha and Donna are both gone by that point.
Yeah.
I didn't even see because when I got to Donna, it was
Because
He's flying solo for those movies.
And we get to the end, and he says, "I don't want to go," and I lost it. And I'm like,
if you only need a minute, take a minute.
I'm 5 episodes in of this show, and I'm like crying over this actor who I haven't even gotten a proper introduction to.
Yeah,
right. So I finish it, and I look over at my roommate, and he's kind of upset, but I'm like really upset, and he's like, "Yeah, dude." Whoa. And I'm like, Craig, wait, I have to watch all of this.
His name was Craig?
Yeah, my roommate Craig. Craig and Gregor, shout out to you. So he's
the lodger.
So that's a reference to another episode we just talked about,
which we've talked about already.
Yeah. So
anyways,
I'm like, okay, I guess I like Doctor Who, and I showed Danielle.
I'm hooked,
and I'm in. And so that's how I found myself watching Doctor Who.
Dig it.
So we're gearing up for the Christmas special coming up.
Yes.
And the Christmas special is starting right off, at least I should hope so, starting right off from where the end of the last season just was.
No, that's... I don't know what number it is. Is it 12?
12? 13?
I think maybe... I don't think it's 13.
To the Googles.
Season 10.
Season 10. Yep.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So we just finished season 10. And season 10, the companion was Bill Potts, who
played by Pearl Bailey.
And she was absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And you know what? Cool. So was I.
Oh, God. Yes.
So...
I'm dying over here. Don't worry about me. We're good.
Yeah. So Pearl Bailey was a companion for approximately 6 adventures
this season.
For the entirety of the season. The season had some long-running arcs, which was really nice. It was kind of a callback to how Doctor Who used to run.
Well, and to subplots. Yeah. You know, some of the things that Davies did when he brought it back.
Right.
So. And I think there were a lot of good callbacks to Davies' runs as well. This season felt a lot more reverent to the classic Doctor Who as well as the Davies run than any of Moffat's other seasons. So let's talk history.
Okay. What do you want to know?
Well, we are coming up to a new episode of Doctor Who with Christmas special happening.
Christmas episode coming up on Christmas.
On Christmas.
Like they do.
What?
I know. Well, and this one is going to be awesome because we get the regeneration into the 13th Doctor.
Which is a huge deal.
Because
it's a woman.
It's a woman.
And it's a lady.
First time.
Yeah.
And what's cool is there was a point when this was discussed back around 11, and the conversation generally went the same way every time. If we made it into a woman, it would feel like we were doing it purely because...
Stunt casting.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, you're welcome. Fun fact, when Tom Baker was leaving at the end of his 7-year run, he suggested that the actor who should come after him be a woman.
Mm-hmm. Tom Baker left in the mid-70s? 80s, yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm. He was in the role for 7 years.
That's right, yeah, he was the longest. Right?
Yeah, because we didn't get out of Troughton until mid-70s, I guess.
69 was his last year.
Is Troughton that
Pertwee
quick?
Starts with 1970.
Oh, man, I must have...
Troughton really kind of started the 3-year thing.
Yeah.
Okay, because Hartnell... it starts in like...
When was Kennedy assassinated?
I know, it happened the week Kennedy was assassinated.
It was the day Kennedy was assassinated. That's why they reran the episode.
Oh, wow.
So Doctor Who is a very old
Welcome
show.
to our history section.
Doctor Who is a very old television show. It is one of the longest running sci-fi television shows in the history of television, and it started in the 60s.
63.
Wait, 63. Okay.
November
22nd. So November 22nd, 1963 was the premiere episode, and because of the JFK assassination, they reran it, which the television stations did not do that. Yeah. There was no such thing as a rerun.
Which we'll get to later because it ends up having a major effect on the Doctor Who series.
Yes.
So there are no reruns, and they reran it because they're like, well, we put all this effort into this dang thing.
Right.
Which can be seen in a film called
An Adventure in Time and Space.
Time and Space.
Now, do you want to go back a little farther?
Let's go back. Let's go all the way back. Set it up.
I like that. That was very well done.
What the fuck was that?
I think it was supposed to be the TARDIS. It wasn't quite.
I don't know. When Danielle and I are together, we can do it perfectly because I make one sound and she makes the other.
Yeah, it is definitely more sound than one person can make.
Yeah. Unless you're Kenny G and
Right.
can do that weird, inward breathing while you're making noise thing.
We're not going to talk about that guy. 1962, the BBC has been discussing the idea of televised science fiction. Okay, and they had decided, yes, we want to explore the idea of science fiction more because they had done a series called Quatermass, which was scientist, kind of a Reed Richards sort of guy, saving the world from weird sciencey shit.
Yeah.
Blah blah.
As you do.
As one does, right?
Yeah.
And they brought in a guy named Sidney Newman, who was Canadian, so a member of the Commonwealth. And he was like, yes, I'm here for science fiction. Let's do some science fiction. And so they start putting together this show. It's not called Doctor Who yet. The protagonist is not the Doctor yet. But we have a functionally immortal guy from the future. We have a male and female, we'll say, companion, and possibly a family member. Okay, they were looking for some kind of quote unquote with it young lady to appeal to that young demographic.
Got to bring it in.
Right.
Right. And it provides, again, a lens for a particular audience to look through.
Right, it's our access.
Yeah.
Then Newman brings in Verity Lambert, 27-year-old female producer, which was something of a rarity at the time, the woman part, not the 27-year-old, which is kind of appalling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it still is. So.
Yeah, there's not a lot of women producers and women.
Or
There's not a lot of women in the higher up end of the industry. In fact, below the line crew is rarely female either.
Yeah,
which
we're starting to see more of that at the BBC with women like Julie Gardner and several of the directors from the recent couple of series. But Verity Lambert was definitely a rare bird at that point. Yeah. But anyway, and under Verity, the show starts to become more like what we tend to think of as Doctor Who. The time traveler, the guy from the future, has become the Doctor. Our with it young lady has become his granddaughter, Susan. And our male and female companion are two of Susan's teachers, Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright.
Yes.
Okay.
I've never actually watched the first few. I've never watched anything before the Eighth Doctor. So
there is a witty, wry kind of, I wouldn't call it arrogance, but cockiness in the original, in William Hartnell's first Doctor.
Oh,
that
yeah,
really
absolutely.
doesn't come back as snappy until Capaldi, which is something I really appreciated about this last season in particular.
I feel like Eccleston had some of that sass.
He did.
Yeah.
Sass for sure. But his sass was more like, and David Tennant does it too, and so does Matt Smith. There comes a point where they finally have to tell somebody, not usually the companion, but somebody else, listen, I know what the heck I'm doing. Please get out of my way.
Been here for a couple of years.
And when he lays into them, that's when that comes out. But the no, you're just dumb. That sort of thing really shines in Capaldi's, except for when Matt Smith says, and I'm clever, because he brings that up a lot. That's William Hartnell, the
Hartnell's thing. Hartnell is the wit and the sass. And part of the reason they had Ian Chesterton, he's the muscle. He's the beefcake. Can I say beefcake?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll say beefcake. He's the man of action.
Yeah.
Because William Hartnell was an older fella at that point.
Old enough that his lifespan comes into question as far
His
as
health becomes an issue. and actually that's really a stroke of genius. That's what allows the show to become to take on a life. To take on a life past the original casting.
So the show airs.
The show airs 1963, November 22nd. It gets re-aired because of the Kennedy assassination.
Which is a big deal because of the re-airing situation, as well as the fact that this is one of those situations where the news has overshined your regular TV programming.
This is one of those moments where an event that's happening across the ocean has literally worldwide implications.
And what's really cool about that too is, TV covering that sort of thing to a point where they have to remove an irregularly scheduled program. It's kind of a big deal as well. That there's something on the news that we can have a breaking news thing on television. Now we suddenly have this thing that, just 20 years prior, you wouldn't have known about until the newspapers printed it the next day.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe 2 days later.
Yeah. this information is now traveling fast, and now the world is getting in the way of your programming.
Right, and the world's getting smaller in a lot of ways.
Only Doctor Who, damn it.
So the show airs, and it has, I'm sure, relatively abysmal ratings compared to what's going on with the BBC News.
Right, so they re-air the show, and what was kind of a surprise, considering all the hassles that they had in the run up to it, it's a hit. And let's talk about those hassles for a second. I mentioned them to you earlier, but part of the problem was the way the studios were allocated. They ended up in the Lime Grove Studios, which was an upstairs studio,
which means it's hot as balls during the summer.
Bingo. And
60s architecture, don't forget that.
And the lift couldn't accommodate the stuff they needed to get up there.
Yeah.
Like all the electrical equipment and stuff was stored in the studio, which just doesn't happen. And then there was some question as to whether or not maybe they were going to move the show to the newly built television center downtown London. Are they going to move it to a different studio? And so they didn't really know A, what space they were going to be using, B, what they could and couldn't realistically move, with that lift. Yeah. And so they, with weeks before filming is supposed to start, they're not sure where they're filming. They can't, and because they're not sure where they're filming, they can't generate a set list. They can't generate a prop list. Yeah. Like the originally intended first story. And as an aside, BBC TV back then isn't the way we think of TV now. We think of TV now in either, half hour or hour increments, including commercials. But originally for Doctor Who anyway, it was 20 to 25 minute episodes.
Yeah, so relatively short.
Right. So a story would be 4 to 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Okay. The original premiere story was supposed to be The Giants, wherein, as you might anticipate, our protagonists, the Doctor, Susan, Ian, and Barbara, are all shrunk. Okay. That's one of two options, really.
Yeah.
And so they're stuck in their lab, and they have to, figure out how to do it. Well, they ended up not being able to do that because of the space limitations. Mm-hmm. And so they ended up with an unearthly child. Here's Susan, here's Ian and Barbara at Coal Hill School. And we'll see Coal Hill School off and on throughout the 50 plus years.
Chesterton's the headmaster of Coal Hill School when Clara was working there.
Right, okay, yeah.
And
you don't see him, but his name's on the plaque.
Right.
He's there.
Then we go to the past, to the caveman times, and the Doctor is sassy as balls. But you mentioned earlier how William Hartnell's health becomes an issue. And in 1966, his health was deteriorating to the point where they were using stand-ins for some filming because he couldn't, for like distance shots, not for the up close stuff. But his health just wasn't
as possible, which
his health just wasn't able to accommodate the rigors of the shooting schedule. Yeah. And so I can't remember, I think the term they used was refreshed. The term regenerated wasn't introduced into the show until much later. But they rebrought him, and the original intent was kind of like what they did with Bewitched with Darren. They trade out one Darren for the next, but they're basically the same dude. They just don't really acknowledge the fact that they've switched actors.
Yeah.
Well, when they bring in Patrick Troughton, that was the original intent. He was just going to be the Doctor and still be sassy and mouthy and all that. No, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
Troughton decided, no, I'm going to play it like this. I'm going to play it with a lighter touch, more of the cosmic hobo as he came to be known, and that worked.
It worked.
But I'll tell you a couple things. At the end of Hartnell's last episode, when he regenerates, accounts that I've read, people freaked the fuck out.
Oh, yeah?
They're like, oh my God, what's happening right now?
It was such a new concept that people just couldn't wrap their minds around.
There was no precedent for it.
Yeah.
No precedent.
I mean, and think about science fiction and
time.
Fantasy. Yeah, in the 60s.
Late 60s?
You have,
early 70s?
There are some concepts
late
that
60s.
have not even been brought up. So many staples of modern sci-fi and fantasy get established at this time.
Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek hasn't even made it to England at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
People are losing their mind that Troughton has come in now.
Yeah.
Well, that the doctor is your generator. Oh my God, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And we get this whole new thing, and it's like, oh my God, this is so weird.
Yeah.
Which of course creates buzz, which of course creates ratings.
Right? Okay, so Troughton fades in literally as the show is ending.
Right.
He doesn't even get a word. Okay. And we start the next story, which is called The Power of the Daleks, which BBC just did like an animated version of.
Right, yeah.
And we'll talk about why that was necessary in a minute. But Ben and Polly, his companions, are freaking the fuck out.
Yeah.
Because they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't
Who the
know
heck
what's
is this
happening.
guy?
Exactly.
And why
that's
is he
What happened to
replaced?
the old guy?
Exactly.
The old guy.
And that's Ben's kind of overriding concern throughout the bulk of the episode. It's like, where's the doctor? And Troughton is not helpful at all in explaining this because he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
You know?
He's
and
the doctor.
so exactly.
And this is also, he's established that he is the lone staple in the series because Susan gets left on Earth at the end of
The Dalek invasion of Earth.
Dalek invasion of Earth.
Oh god, that's one of the best speeches
It
ever.
is such a good story too. And Susan gets left behind.
The important part of the speech is, one day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.
Damn.
Yeah. And he says to her before that, as he's leading up to it, you know, you've got your own life to live and you need to establish your roots elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't just be hanging on me, waiting for me and, you know, living for me. And so he, you know, they're gone. Ian and Barbara hang out for a little while, but eventually they're gone as well. And now we have Billy and
Ben
and
Polly.
Polly. No, I combined their names.
And Hartnell has a few other
Yeah.
companions, you know, Steve, I think. There's an astronaut in there.
Yeah. So we eventually
we get around to Ben and Polly.
Yeah, we eventually have just have established that the Doctor flies around in his TARDIS, and he goes through all of time and space with whoever the heck he pleases, and that's the only thing that this show really has as a staple. And now we've gotten rid of the Doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with the Doctor having been gone, Ben and Polly are like, what the hell does this mean?
Yeah.
And so is the entire audience.
Yeah, so is the audience. And honestly, we don't really get much of an explanation for any of this until we get to the end of Troughton's tenure in 69.
Yeah, when Pertwee shows up.
Because that's when we get the introduction of the Time Lords and of Gallifrey.
A little more background for the Doctor.
Yes, because there wasn't really a need to develop any of that. Because I don't know that Sidney Newman or Verity Lambert or any of the other people involved in starting the show really expected things to go as long as
they didn't have like a long-term plan kind of thing.
Bingo.
I was recently listening to the Steven Universe podcast, and in the Steven Universe podcast, they were talking about when it opened. When that show started, at the very last episode that they thought they were going to be making, which was this Mirror Gym, Ocean Gym two-parter, they realized this is the moment where we have to start establishing the world building that we've done. Because up until then, when you're kind of just doing Monster of the Week, when you're on a short game, you don't have time to establish a giant universe like this.
Right.
So
you
when
might
you're
sprinkle on things here and there, but
when you're at the end of your sixth season and you're in a show in a genre that's really largely untouched.
Wait a minute. Did you say at the end of your 6th season they start figuring all this out?
Doctor Who does.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I
When
thought
you're
we
at
were,
the end, in Doctor Who.
Sorry, I thought we were still talking about Steven Universe.
That's what I thought too.
So back on Doctor
Okay.
Who, when you're at the end of your 6th season and your episodes are relatively short and you're in a world of television where large, complicated world building hasn't happened yet, the point at which you get to go, here's some explanations for some world building stuff we haven't done yet.
Yeah.
Right,
This is
okay.
when larger canon becomes a thing,
Right.
which we now have in Star Wars and in Star Trek and in modern Doctor Who and so many other shows. We can start expanding beyond the original medium with the larger world building, which we'll get to later.
Right.
But by bringing this all in, suddenly this universe just got a whole lot bigger.
And paradoxically, a whole lot smaller.
Yeah.
Because when they bring in John Pertwee, that happens when the Time Lords say, okay, you've been running around causing some problems.
In your stolen TARDIS.
In your stolen TARDIS. So now you're stuck, you're grounded. And you're grounded on Earth. And so, and part
Since
of
you
that,
like it so much, why don't you marry it?
So in the real world, there were budget issues. That's the big reason they stuck Pertwee on Earth.
sense.
But in the storyline, you're grounded.
Yeah.
And so he starts.
Also, congratulations, you're in color.
Yes,
Oh.
that's true. That's when we start moving into the color episodes.
Trouton fades out in black and white, and the
John
next
Pertwee
episode
starts in color.
Oh, that's
right
really
on
cool.
right on Earth in the middle of a grass field.
What is this color?
What sucks for our companions, Jamie and Zoe, is that they've been mind wiped. They have no recollection of any of their adventures. Zoe is from, I think she was from like the 21st century, but Jamie was a Highland piper from like just before the Battle of Culloden.
Which I wish they would do again. I don't like every companion being late 20th century, early 21st century.
A contemporary young lady.
Contemporary young lady also. But
Yeah.
this is, this is a wild and crazy time for the
Yes.
BBC sci-fi department.
Right? And
So this is a podcast, and Bryce just threw his arms around
Kermit Flail.
Kermit flailing. Anyway, so now we're in Pertwee's run.
Right. And we get into
Which
things.
is what number, Doctor?
Three.
3. Just keep
Third
it.
Doctor, no problem.
So we're at the third Doctor, the second regeneration of the Doctor, but this is the third actor to play the Doctor.
Well, sort of.
Go on.
So while all of this was happening, while Hartnell was still the Doctor, they did a movie, eventually two movies.
Peter Cushing.
Peter Cushing played the Doctor.
Did you really?
Peter Cushing played Doctor Who, but not
The Doctor.
canon Doctor Who, not the Doctor.
Yeah.
Instead of an alien time traveler, Peter Cushing's Doctor Who is a human doctor named Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yes.
It's very 1960s.
Instead of Susan being his granddaughter, he has Susan and Barbara as granddaughters, and Ian is Barbara's boyfriend. And the movie is called Doctor Who and the Daleks.
Which is based on a story
Right.
It's based on the second story that Hartnell did,
featuring the
The
dogs.
Mutants.
Oh, okay.
And it was an effort to familiarize American audiences with Doctor Who. Hartnell was kind of irritated at not getting to play
His part?
his role. Yeah.
Understand.
Also, Peter Cushing,
Peter Cushing, man.
known for
Grand Moff Tarkin.
Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars,
And
is
for all
not
those-
a
go ahead.
wispy-haired bald man, but instead a thick-haired man with a very, very nice mustache.
This is true.
Very strange to see Grand Moff Tarkin in a
those-
suit.
True. For those of you who are horror fans, he was also big in the Hammer horror
yeah.
pictures. Hammer was like the preeminent studio in London making horror movies.
So America gets
Cushing-
their version of
Right.
Doctor Who.
And it was okay. Looking at it from a early 21st century perspective, it's pretty fucking funny. I thought it was hilarious. There are things in there that are stupid. I mean, not the least of which is the changes they make to the Doctor.
Yeah.
Because apparently Americans can't comprehend an alien time traveler.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nor
Whatever.
can we comprehend what the Philosopher's Stone is.
Oh, don't get me started.
Transitions from England to America have not always been the most
Smooth.
Logical.
smooth and have not always been not condescending.
Okay.
Oh, colonies.
Oh, colonies, we have a show for you.
Yes.
We recommend drinking it with tea if you didn't throw it all in the harbor. There seems to be some bitterness, I'm just saying.
So there was a sequel, Doctor Who and the Dalek Invasion of Earth 2115.
This time it's
2105. Well, here's right. You ready for another fun fact?
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
Has this not just been a 20-minute fun fact fest?
That's what I do. So you have both seen the Donna episodes, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Donna is a companion of the Doctor in the modern revamping of the series.
So Wilf, Donna's grandfather,
Oh, yeah. Such a badass.
Bernard McCribbins,
Yes.
is in. He's the male lead of action in Doctor
remember
Who
reading
and
it,
the
yeah.
Daleks of
Yes.
Daleks Invasion of
Yeah.
Earth 2105. So, and he is a strapping young man, super handsome.
Wolford is by far the
Greatest companion.
The greatest companion that is-
companion ever.
the greatest short-lived companion.
Short-term companion.
Short-term companion
Oh.
I think there's ever
and
been.
he kills me every time.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Well,
Oh, God.
I break into tears every fucking time.
I'm not gonna give spoilers on this. If you haven't seen this, I will save that for you. If you haven't sat down to watch
The End of
David
Time.
Tennant's run, and that was one of
There
those
were
first
so many-
episodes I saw.
Yeah, I know.
And when it came back to watch that a second time after
Oh,
I'd
I bet it
seen
was even
all of
worse.
that run, I was heaving sobs, just on the ground, hands holding my face as I just lost it like a terrible, obnoxious little child. Like, I cannot go on long enough to tell you how much this scene has affected me in my life.
Dig it.
Anyway, so
So
Pertwee's technically the fourth person to play the
but
Doctor.
for canon
purposes, he is
he's
the third official Doctor.
Right.
Although, fun fact, while modern and the majority last, 20 seasons of Doctor Who or so have referred to the Doctor as the Doctor, in the credits of William Hartnell's Doctor Who episodes, he is credited as Doctor Who.
That is
So, when you encounter your gatekeeper who is upset that you have referred to the Doctor as, quote, Doctor Who, you can bust that knowledge on him and say, listen, buddy, while this may be a simple mistake now, you should know, yada, 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 yada. Points you. So, we have Pertwee now. We are in color. We don't have our previous companions because they don't even know who the Doctor is.
They don't have different color.
And the Doctor
is now working for the United Nations Intelligence Task Force.
Which means he is stuck on Earth, and he will be stuck on Earth for quite a while.
No TARDIS. Instead, we get the Whomobile, which is like a fancy hovercraft, and Bessie.
Bessie is
a canary yellow Model A badass car.
It's great.
Bessie is pimp. Which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd say out loud.
So, we have Pertwee's. We now have him work. He's a working man.
Yep, working for the United Nations.
Mysteries.
United Nations Intelligence Task Force as a science advisor. And this is where we get the introduction to the Master.
Mr. Brigadier.
Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. Oh, the Brig. God, love that dude. Nicholas Courtney was the actor. And that his passing actually gets referenced by the 11th Doctor.
Yeah, I remember
with
that.
the phone call to the Brig. And right, I know.
You just missed him.
Damn it. Anyway, so we get the Master played by
Good work.
We get the Master played by Roger Delgado, and he almost becomes a co-star. You know, there was a feeling that they were going to that well too many times. And so at the end of the 10th season, I think, they had decided that they were going to write him out. You know, they were going to kill off the Master, leaving it unclear as to maybe he had sacrificed himself to save the Doctor.
Okay.
And then, like, some real-life tragedy hits. Roger Delgado, the actor who played the Master, was killed in a car crash during the season break.
Oh, wow.
And Pertwee and Delgado were, like, super close. And between Delgado's death, the actress who played Jo Grant, Katie Manning, she had left. And and then the producers, Barry Letts and Terrence Dix. Terrence Dix? I think it was Terrence Dix. Were leaving. And so Pertwee was like, I feel like my family, is leaving, and particularly Delgado's death hit him hard. So he's like, I think I'm done here.
Yeah.
But, Elizabeth Sladen comes in as Sarah Jane.
Oh, right.
And she, the story that she tells in one of the DVD interviews is that he just made some unreasonable salary demand.
Oh, okay.
And was let go. So I suspect that if the salary demand story is true, and she would probably be in a better position to know, I feel like maybe that was made to, force the hand, kind of give an excuse.
And I think on some level it was, look, I don't want to do this because my family is falling apart here.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're like, well, you can. And he probably responded with something
contract.
like, well,
if you want me
that bad, and I'll be willing to deal with that problem this way for this much. Mm-hmm. And that might have been a combination of them. But regarding the Master's character, he's on there so often in a way, according to Robert Sloman, who is a writer on the show, that because they're two sides of the same coin.
Right.
And Robert Sloman says the Master was the id to the Doctor's ego.
Yeah,
they are absolutely, the Master takes on more emotional situations with a running on instinct and impulsive, and this carries on clear into modern times with the Master's reiteration, the
John
versions of the
Sims.
Masters. All of them.
And Missy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They are the emotional side, and while the Doctor is very much an emotionally attached person,
Clearly.
the Doctor is seen as the sort of logical.
Right.
He's able to separate his emotions from the bigger picture.
Yeah. And not to go down this rabbit hole, but I did just read something about a guy who lost his ability to basically feel emotions because of damage to his frontal lobe.
Really?
And his decision-making processes went down the toilet because while he was able to do everything logically, he was stuck with analysis paralysis, like literal analysis paralysis. His whole life fell apart. And his whole life falls apart because he can't bring those emotions in and use them to make decisions. And so he'd be like, he wouldn't have that gut instinct, because what happens in our brains is that there's the reason old people are better at making decisions. Well, older people like us are better at making decisions than like 20-year-olds is because we have so many experiences that our brain can go to working memory and go, here's an emotion we feel in this instance, just so you know, you've been here before, whether they need to actually tell you consciously what that memory was or not.
Okay.
So those gut feelings,
Makes sense,
you
yeah.
need your emotions to have those.
Yeah.
And the Doctor, being the somewhat emotional being, has his instincts. He's 800 years old. Well, in the first several, he's only about 300 or 400. But is he? I feel like he's somewhere around there.
The original document has him at about 650 or so for the first season.
Oh, well, then.
So,
All right.
I mean, he's on Earth. It's not like he's traveling in time.
Yeah.
fair.
But the Doctor is a wise man.
Yeah.
And he doesn't run on his emotions which keeps him from making some terrible mistakes.
Right.
The Master has to have some pretty critical mistakes, otherwise he's not going to be a compelling bad guy, because the compelling bad guy needs a tragic flaw just as much, and that I think is what gets the Master in a lot of those situations.
It's like a 70-30 kind of thing, and they're on opposite sides of the logic emotional part.
Yeah. And I think that the play that you can have with those two characters is just too compelling for a writer to ignore, and that's probably why he stays on for as long as he does. But then his
Plus,
death,
if they're good friends, they're gonna have great chemistry on screen.
which makes
Their
for great.
chemistry
Yeah, let's bring
is
Delgado back. I'm
fantastic.
sure has been said a couple of times on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Pertwee, we get to the end of his time.
How long was he there?
3 years? 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Then we get to Tom Baker.
My brother Barrett's favorite Doctor,
Indeed.
the one with the big ass scarf and the goofy hat.
Right. Would you like a jelly baby?
Yeah.
That's the thing that he does. And that was actually the first one to appear in comics. Well, sort of. First one to appear in Marvel Comics.
Oh, cool.
Well, the Marvel Comics were reprinting the comics from the Doctor Who magazine, which starts during Baker's time.
Okay.
I have the first issue of Doctor Who magazine.
Oh, rad.
Bought it for Charlotte because she decided she wanted to collect Doctor Who magazines.
Cool.
Well, when my baby wants to collect something, I get her thing.
I'm gonna need to see it.
I can show it to you later. Anyway, so Baker becomes the Doctor, largely unknown. He'd had a few experiences, but originally they wanted to cast an older guy, more like Hartnell. Get some of that gravitas back. But they went with the younger guy, and
It worked out great.
it worked out great. There were some conflicts behind the scenes because partway through his tenure, they wanted to make it. Well, there was some conflict because he would ad-lib some lines, and they're like, "Why aren't you following the script?"
Because I'm better.
Because I'm
Because
the
ad-lib
doctor.
lines regularly work out really, really well.
Because I'm the goddamn doctor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he stays for 7 years, and
The longest tenure up until this point.
longest tenure, and he decides. Towards the end, they're like, yeah, we're going to make this a little lighter. He's like, okay, I'm cool with that. Then he's like, I'm ready. It's time. And so they wanted to cast, they ended up casting Peter Davison. But, fun fact, originally they wanted Richard Griffiths. You know who Richard Griffiths is?
Nope.
Uncle Vernon.
No way.
Way.
He just passed away 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He passed away recently. But he was the original first choice. But he
No damn letters today.
Exactly. But he
First
wasn't.
swear word I ever read in a book.
Yeah.
He wasn't. That's why I don't write books. But he wasn't available, and so they went with Davison.
Oh, wow.
Davison was known from All Creatures Great and Small, I think. which was a miniseries based on a book, and it was not science fiction. But he was definitely more a man of action even than Tom Baker. Not as much as Pertwee, because with Pertwee, he had been a comedic actor, but wanted to establish some dramatic bona fides.
Okay, yeah.
So his doctor was much more a man of action, much more serious. That's where we get the Venusian Aikido, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. Yeah. And the first sonic screwdriver, I think.
Oh, really?
I think it was 3. Maybe it was 2, but I think it was 3.
And Pertwee is, he's on Earth, so his problems aren't going to be... he's working for a military organization, so his problems aren't always going to be solving the mystery. Sometimes they're going to be
Here's a
handling
fight.
your shit.
I gotta handle this shit.
Yeah.
And he's young, which is not what we
Pertwee
can
was
say.
not so much young.
But he looks... He's in color, so he looks a lot younger than Troughton and Hartnell do.
Fair, I'll concede that point.
And while he's not nearly as young or as pretty as
Baker or Davison,
he definitely has an energy about him in the way he moves about. He's not, Hartnell slumped over for the majority of his series. Troughton is witty and smart, and he's quick. You can tell he's definitely younger, but he's an older guy. You can see it in his face.
Well, when Hartnell comes back for the 3 Doctors for the 10th anniversary special, his involvement is limited. He's sitting around because his health, he's within a year, maybe a year and a half of being dead at this point.
So the 3 Doctors is a special.
Well, it was the first serial of the 10th season. So December of 72.
And it's the first time we've put the history of the Doctor Who franchise on a real tight-knit, everything's clumped together. Let's see how this works together.
Yeah, kind of. The Time Lords face a threat that is so severe that they need to call in not just the greatest Time Lord, I guess he'd be the greatest Time Lord, but past incarnations of the greatest Time Lord.
You can have them in the same timeline for whatever reason.
Yes.
You can't have 2 Tom Bakers, but you certainly can have Pertwee and
Troughton
and Hartnell all together.
Yes, and Hartnell was old, and within a year, maybe a year and a half of dying.
Wow.
So his involvement in the special mostly consisted of him sitting in a chair, reading his lines from cue cards. Yeah, it was pretty brutal to watch.
But it's still cool that he was there.
Yes, absolutely.
And he's in color.
And they kind of do this every time there's a big anniversary. You know? We get the 5 Doctors at the 20th anniversary, even though Baker's involvement really is getting frozen in a time shard thing. Because he was like,
poor guy.
Well, that was his choice. He was like, yeah, I'll show up for a day of filming.
More than Eccleston did.
Yeah, well...
I would love to watch Eccleston talk with Matt Smith.
Eccleston had some regrets, I think, about not coming back for that.
Which we'll get to when we get to modern Doctor. So let's start jumping forward real quick.
Yeah.
So we've gone through Hartnell. We've introduced the idea of regeneration by introducing Troughton. Troughton ends the black and white run, and we get Jonathan Pertwee. And he is kind of a man of action. We show the Doctor can be kind of a young, spry, but not yet too young, but man of action on Earth.
Well, and Pertwee comes by that honestly because he was a spy in World War II.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So he was...
He had some training.
He was a legitimate
legit.
badass.
Wow.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Tom Baker. And around the time of Tom Baker's end, the idea of a rerun, aside from our first episode, which is kind of a weird foreshadowing, the idea of a rerun just isn't a concept that the BBC thinks about.
Well, but here's why. Because you kind of need to understand the difference between television in America and television in Britain. Television in America is let's do Hollywood with advertisements and kind of on the cheap. The BBC is let's do plays.
Yeah, this is very much a play.
Like in the mid '50s, they did a production of 1984 with Peter Cushing.
Yeah,
and they showed it one day, and when they rebroadcast it, they performed the entire play again.
Wow,
live.
And theater is still very important in the film industry of Britain to this day. Mm-hmm. When you look up the credits of most of Doctor Who's cast, but particularly the one I noticed the other day was Pearl Bailey. Over half of her credits are from when she was in theater. Theater credits.
It's funny because Pearl auditioned she She did her matinee performance of whatever play she was in, went to her audition for Doctor Who, and then came back for her evening performance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The theater is a major part of that film industry to this day. So we have this mentality.
Yeah, well, the idea of saving videotapes of films would be as laughable to the BBC in those days as the idea of taking every stage performance ever done and putting it in a bottle and saving it for later. It's the same kind of same kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And so, and there wasn't really a concept of, there wasn't even a concept of these things might be historically important. Never mind the fact that the idea that these might be commercially viable.
Right.
I mean,
because that wasn't their mindset at the BBC.
At the BBC, and kind of culturally in Britain. I mean, it's like the bit in Back to the Future when Marty, shows up at Lorraine's house, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen this one. It's a rerun," and the kid's like, "What the hell's a rerun?"
Yeah,
It's like inconceivable. You had to watch Doctor Who when it was on the first time, so you could be part of the conversation in the schoolyard the next morning.
Pretty much probably never see it again.
Exactly.
And now you won't.
For a lot of people, the only way, if you missed an episode, you'd have to rely on the novelizations to catch the ones you missed. So, but yeah, they basically
literally burn.
Well, there were a couple other things going on here because they were licensing out Doctor Who and not just Doctor Who, because it's not just Doctor Who episodes they burned. It was things like Dad's Army and probably Coronation Street and things like that. Long-running soap operas. They would license them out for broadcast in other countries, but they would make 16 millimeter film prints of the episodes and send them out. Okay. And so then what you have is a case of one hand not knowing what the other hand is doing. Yeah. It wasn't a syndication package like, say, I don't know, Street Hawk. Is that too inside baseball? Yeah. Okay. Friends,
Doctor Who on to Sci-Fi.
Like Friends. It's not a syndication package like Friends where it's like, here's all the tapes. It's here's our film of Doctor Who or Dad's Army or Coronation Street or whatever. Yeah. Okay, you either need to return it or destroy it when you're done with it. When the license expires. Meanwhile, BBC headquarters is like, oh, we can get rid of these because we've got these.
And in fact, many of the episodes that have resurfaced in the last 10 years or so, since the destruction of the majority of Hartnell and
Wait. You're jumping way ahead here. Why were they destroyed?
Because of there were a couple things. They needed the space. They were just basically like
literal space.
Okay, let's back it up even more. Spoilers. A lot of the episodes of Doctor Who are missing or destroyed or
Did we not mention that?
Way ahead.
Okay,
So
I'll
that's
back
why
up.
I'm backing us up.
Okay, so just so you caught on to all these things, all of these things are going on in the 70s, and it leads to a horrible tragedy of the Doctor Who fandom in that there are approximately 6 seasons of Doctor Who that are not entirely around anymore.
Well, hang on. Yeah. Okay. This is all happening behind the scenes. Right. It becomes apparent later, round about Davison's time. Okay. But in the during Baker's time, the BBC started destroying film. Okay. Basically, it became a regular practice. It was a regular practice. They would basically erase the tapes, the video. Yeah. The format was changing, was part of the issue, but also they needed the tapes, they needed the space, and again, they didn't have a concept that these things might be historically important. Right. They didn't have an idea, because this is way before the advent of home video as a viable thing, so they didn't have a concept that it might be a future revenue stream. And for a long time, it wasn't. It was. I mean, I'll come back to that part. No, I'll mention it now. And when Doctor Who goes on hiatus, it's still generating revenue through VHS sales. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then when they switch to DVDs, got to reissue all that shit on DVD. Yeah. So it comes to pass that the idea of the rerun eventually shows up, and somebody somewhere goes, where the hell are all of our Doctor Who tapes? Yeah. Now, the tragedy is that a lot of Troughton's episodes, there's 108 episodes out of 690 or something like that, are gone.
Yep.
They don't exist in the BBC archives. Some of them sometimes you'll hear of an episode getting found like at a TV station in Nigeria.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's oftentimes
the last 5
smaller
or 6 now that
countries.
Doctor Who's gotten very big and very popular, you'll hear of just random stories. Like there's been a random episode that's been found and like random.
I may be mistaken and I may have read this wrong, but there was a point where the BBC was so desperate to get back some of those episodes again that they were offering full-size Daleks if you could come up with a certain number of episodes in your archives. And a lot of them, weirdly enough, came from Central America. There were a lot of areas like Puerto Rico and Costa Rica that had old reels that had not gotten destroyed as per the original instructions as they were supposed to be, that they gave back to the BBC. And now what we wound up with is we have a lot of episodes from William Hartnell's first season.
Well, no, most of the first, they had their destruction methods was really random. You know, it's not like they said, okay, we're going to start with the first episode of Doctor Who and just start erasing.
No.
You know, it's most of Hartnell's seasons are there. Although, interestingly, the last episode of the 10th Planet, which is Hartnell's final story, that final episode doesn't exist except for a clip, the regeneration clip, used on a kids show called Blue Peter. If it was, and they found it in the Blue Peter archives.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so if it wasn't for that, then it would not exist.
What's also weird is there is a lot of audio from William Hartnell's run still.
And Troughton's.
So you can still listen to the original episodes.
At the time, they were done on two separate
formats.
devices.
Yeah, so the audio format might still be there. And so some people have actually done fan animations.
Well, the BBC has done with
they did just like last year, 2 years ago?
with Troughton's first story, Power of the Daleks. Yeah. They did the animation of, and it looks like an episode of Archer.
Yeah, it's kind of that semi-flash style.
But it's super cool, and I think it's really well done. They did
Probably
it both.
It's better graphics.
They did a black and white version, you know, the way it was originally broadcast,
effects, as it were.
and they did a color version. Cool. I'm hoping that they will the ratings were good enough and the DVD sales were good enough that they will continue to do that. Because boy, what I'd really like is some of the episodes with Jamie McCrimmon as his companion. I mean, because that may be the broiest bromance in Doctor Who. You know, I mean, maybe some of Nine and Jack, but Jamie and Two are
the bromance.
They are super pimp.
Okay. So we've lost some of those early things. So any fan that comes in towards the third and fourth iterations of the Doctor are still not able to get those, even when that becomes an option to them.
Well, not on video,
reruns.
but you could get novelizations,
right?
You know,
of like the scripts they've done.
Yeah,
yeah. And then we've got when do audio dramas start?
Audio dramas don't start until the kind of dark years, you know, when they're on the hiatus.
Got it. Right. So then we go into we're at the fifth Doctor now,
right?
And his name is
Peter Davison.
And Peter Davison's run. Now Peter Davison is known for the piece of celery.
Yes, he's got
on his white jacket,
on his cricket jacket.
Yeah. Yes, and he is young, and he is attractive, and he is a man of action,
beautiful man,
and he is a definite departure from even Baker, young as he was a goofy looking guy.
Yeah. Well, and we have some interesting things going on with the companions too, because at one point we have 3 companions.
Yep.
You know, we have the first companion death with Adric, and Adric is kind of a jerk anyway. At least that's kind of how people were viewing him. So there were not a lot of tears shed, as I understand it. And he finishes up in 1984, kind of taking Troughton's advice to not stay more than about 3 years. Yeah. And then they bring in Colin Baker at number 6. He's got that kind of Joseph Technicolor Dreamcoat kind of.
Yeah, it's outfit. That time.
Yeah.
The world is definitely lending itself towards that as far as what's in vogue in television and not.
Right.
And he is rarely talked about with much of any emotion.
Well, which is kind of sad. Here's the deal. Because Colin understood that, hey, this guy's an alien. And for him to be so buddy-buddy with humans, with what are clearly an inferior species, is a little weird.
Yeah.
You know? And so his doctor is terse. His doctor is short with his companions.
Huh.
And, you know, people were not digging it. You know, there was some complaints from the BBC. And so he gets the boot pretty early on. You know, he's there for, I think, 2 years. And it's unfortunate that they did him dirty. I feel like they did him dirty like that because he had some ideas. He did not come to this characterization by accident. And it was part of a larger plan on his part, you know, which you mentioned the audio dramas earlier. He's done a number of those, which gave him the opportunity to flesh out his journey.
Okay.
You know, his journey from crabby humans are inferior to, man, humans are so awesome and I love them. And here's why.
Yeah. Which is the staple of modern Doctor Who.
Yes.
So Baker 2.0, his run ends.
His run ends with controversy because they fire him and then they're like, oh, by the way, you want to come back and film a regeneration scene? And he's like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's how you get Sylvester McCoy face down in a Colin Baker wig for the regeneration.
Oh, man.
Oh, it is ugly.
But what's really cool about this is when they're like, we stop watching, they stop airing Doctor Who at this point.
After McCoy's run.
Oh, right.
Yeah, with the seventh Doctor.
Seventh Doctor.
So he finishes his run.
I was thinking, because Sylvester McCoy is the one with all the question marks to a point of obnoxiousness, who's not very attractive.
He's got the question mark vest.
And the bowler hat.
Yeah, it's more like a pork pie.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking of him earlier when I mentioned all the question marks.
Yeah, well, Colin's got, like I said, the Technicolor Dream Coat, multicolored.
That's right.
Yeah, and yeah, so.
So then we get Sylvester McCoy.
Right, and he's more of a, planner's not the word I want, maybe schemer.
Okay.
Manipulator, that's the word I want, manipulator. Yeah, and you get
coercive.
not coercive, but you get some classic Machiavellian sort of machinations here, you know, particularly in things like Remembrance of the Daleks and stuff like that. Yeah. Another episode that takes place in and around Coal Hill School, by the way. Yeah. So we get to the end of McCoy's, I think it's season 26 by the end of McCoy's run.
Right.
And they're on hiatus, temporary break, which becomes a permanent hiatus. This is 1989, 1990.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And yes, ratings were down a little bit, but revenue was up. And the way the BBC works, you know, people in Britain pay a licensing fee to get TV. And the money all goes into a big pot. And all the revenue that all the shows generate goes into a big pot. And you get what you get. No matter how much money you make for the pot, you get what you get. So thanks to various revenue streams, toys, videos, things like that, Doctor Who was bringing in a lot of money. But that money wasn't showing up on screen.
No.
Okay.
No, we all saw Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park looked great. Doctor Who still wasn't looking great near to that time period.
Bingo. So we've got the break, and we jump ahead to 99 when we get the 8th Doctor.
Which, in that meantime, Doctor Who storyline doesn't end.
No.
We have audio dramas, comic books, novelizations. There are all these other ways in which people can get an expanded version of what the Doctor is, which...
Sort of. The novelizations are literally novelizations of episodes. They haven't gotten really into... Well, at some point in that dark time, they start with the new adventures of Doctor Who. And those are mostly 7.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
McCoy. And the Doctor Who magazine has been doing episodic comic strips. You know, more like the original episodes themselves. They're shorter pieces of longer stories.
Right.
And as the Doctor regenerates on the TV shows, so too does he regenerate in the Doctor Who magazine comics. Right. So we get those. To me, the biggest news is the Big Finish audio dramas. Big Finish starts doing stories of previous Doctors. They have a series called The Companion Chronicles, where stories are being told from the companion's perspective. New stories. Yeah.
And just like British film industry is, they're all pretty much plays.
They're full cast audios.
They're like radio plays from the before 4 times.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we get the 8th Doctor dramas post movie.
That was recently.
Well, they've been an ongoing project, but they started once it became apparent that the 1999 television movie
96.
Was it 96?
96.
It was 96 because it takes place in 1999.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yes. After the 1996 movie, once it becomes apparent that there is not going to be a new show for a while, that's when when Paul McGann continues as the 8th Doctor in the audio dramas.
Yeah. And so we expand upon this story, but we don't necessarily know if we're ever coming back. And that's kind of the end of early Who before the
Don't say it.
Whoboot.
Oh fuck! That is.
It's a thing.
That's gonna follow me like a.
That was the first time I ever heard that word was tonight earlier. So I don't know.
Whoboot. I made that up earlier. I made that up, and
I know it's terrible.
So it's your fault.
I made that up, and said that's why I said, "Oh, that's terrible." I'm never saying that again.
Modern Doctor Who really starts after that, but when we come back with. So, not just a continuation within the story, but we come back to modern Doctor Who with time passed beyond the extended stories as well.
Yes, but there's some stuff going on BBC that we kind of need to talk about first.
Oh, man. Mm-hmm. 2 hours.
So break it up into pieces.
I will.
Okay, I need to pee.
Hey guys, I'm afraid that's all the time we have left for today. Pretty sure an hour and a half is about the max most people are willing to listen to this sort of thing. So we will see you for the second half of this conversation in 2 weeks on Thursday, where Dave will kind of explain what's going on with Doctor Who and what has been for the last 10 years. So, if you want to reach out to us, we definitely encourage you to do so. You can find us on Twitter at Sneaky Geek Pod. You can find us on Instagram at Sneaky Geek Podcast. You can shoot us an email at sneakygeekpodcast@gmail.com, or you can like our Facebook page, which just launched this week. So, we look forward to hearing from you. Oh, and if you gave us a review before Eric Pennell did, which he has officially submitted a review, so that time is done. If you submitted a review before Eric Pennell did, however, go ahead and shoot us your address, and we'll shoot you a little letter, and it will have a button, and it will be nice, and you will be happy, and we will be happy, and everybody will be better off, and life will be good. And that's all.